The reception after Gerald's funeral was held in the parish hall at St. Anthony's. Someone had put out sandwich trays and a coffee urn, and those little butter cookies that come in the blue tin, and people were standing around in their good coats, saying the kinds of things people say, and I was holding a plate of food I wasn't eating and listening. I listened to all of it. He was such a steady man. That was the word people kept using, steady. Gerald's co-workers said it. Our neighbours said it. The couples we'd known for 30 years said it. The ones who'd watched us from across dinner tables and church pews and backyard fences for 4 decades. Steady, reliable. You always knew where you stood with Gerald. Someone said that. I remember thinking, yes, you always knew where you stood with Gerald. You stood slightly behind him and to the left, and you were grateful for the view. I didn't say that out loud. I was 70 years old, and I had been well trained. 45 years. Gerald Raymond Marsh and I were married in June of 1973 in this same church, and he died in March of 2021 at 76 years old. And in between those 2 dates, he paid every bill that came into our house, put 3 children through school, never once raised his hand to me, and went to Mass every Sunday of his adult life. By every measure available to the people standing in that hall eating butter cookies, he had done his job. Father Dominic found me near the end of the reception. He is a kind man. I want to say that because what I am about to tell you is not his fault. It is simply the thing he said. He took both my hands in his and looked at me with genuine warmth and said, "You were a perfect helpmate to him, Dorothea. A perfect helpmate." I thanked him. I meant it. I drove home, walked into my kitchen, stood at the counter, and said the words out loud to myself in the empty house. Perfect helpmate. I said it twice, and somewhere in the second time, I understood something I had not understood while Gerald was alive. That phrase, that generous, loving, well-intentioned phrase, had named me as auxiliary for 45 years. Help, mate. Not the thing itself, the thing that assisted the thing. And everyone at that reception had just spent 2 hours praising me for it. If you have ever stood at a funeral, receiving condolences for a marriage, and felt something you couldn't name, something that wasn't quite grief, and wasn't quite relief, and wasn't quite either, stay with me, because I have spent 3 years excavating what I couldn't name that afternoon, and I need to tell you what I found. These are not complaints. Gerald is dead, and I am not interested in prosecuting a dead man. These are truths, 7 of them. Things nobody said in that parish hall. Things that took me a long time to find the words for, and that I am giving you now because you may need them sooner than I did. It was 1977. Our daughter Brenda was 4 months old. I had been working part-time as a bookkeeper for a dental practice. 3 mornings a week, 12 hours total, $40 that I put in a separate envelope in my dresser drawer and spent on things I chose without asking anyone. It wasn't much money. It was the most important money I have ever had. Gerald came home one evening, sat down at the kitchen table and said, not unkindly, not with any particular emphasis, that he thought it would probably be better if I stopped the bookkeeping now that the baby was here. He said it the way you say something that has already been decided, not cruelly, with complete confidence that the logic was obvious and the outcome was settled. The baby needed me at home. The $40 barely covered the gas to get there and back. He made enough for both of us. This was just practical. Every word was true. I told myself I had chosen to stop. I believed that for a long time. Now, I want to be precise about what happened in that kitchen, because I think precision matters here. Gerald did not forbid me from working. He did not threaten anything. He did not raise his voice or make a scene or do any of the things that in 1977 would have been recognized as a husband controlling his wife. He simply expressed a preference with such complete confidence that the preference became the outcome, and I participated in making it the outcome, and neither of us ever examined what had just happened. That is the mechanism. That is the thing I want you to understand. Financial control in a marriage like ours did not look like a locked door. It looked like a preference, expressed reasonably, absorbed without resistance, and never revisited. 16 years later, 1989, Brenda in high school, Kevin in middle school, Patrice just starting elementary. I sat across from Gerald at the kitchen table after dinner and asked if I could have a separate account. Not a large one, something for household expenses, groceries, the children's school things, so I wouldn't have to ask every time I needed something. Gerald looked at me, not with irritation, I want to be clear about that, because his lack of irritation was somehow the whole problem. He looked at me with the patient expression of a man explaining something obvious to someone he was fond of, and he said, "What do you need a separate account for? I take care of it." That was it. No argument, no cruelty. The question simply reframed my request as unnecessary, as though I had asked for something that already existed in a different form, and all that was needed was for me to understand that. I didn't ask again. For 45 years, I asked Gerald when I needed money. He always said yes. I want to be absolutely clear about that, because I know what some of you are thinking, and it was not that. He was never stingy. He never made me feel ashamed of needing things. He said yes, reliably, generously, without complaint. He also never once said, "Here, this is yours. You don't need to ask." There is a difference between a man who gives you everything and a man who gives you everything you ask for. I did not understand that difference for a very long time. The first man is a partner. The second man is a benefactor. And a benefactor, however generous, requires you to remain in a position of asking. I was 70 years old before I had a bank account with my own name on it and nobody else's. I told myself for 45 years that I had chosen this, that it was practical, that it worked. I want to say, gently but honestly, to any woman who is telling herself the same thing right now, practical and fair are not the same word. I confused them for 4.5 decades. You do not have to. At Gerald's funeral reception, my son Kevin found me in the kitchen. He is 46 years old, Kevin. He has his father's jaw, his father's way of standing, his father's fundamental certainty that the world is a logical place that responds to competent management. He put his arm around my shoulders. He is a physical man, Kevin, warmer than his father in that specific way. And he said, with genuine love, "Dad was a great husband, Mum. He took such good care of you." I looked at my son's face. I looked at Gerald's certainty looking back at me from Kevin's eyes. And I said nothing, because I did not yet have words for the thing that was happening in my chest when Kevin said that. I have the words now. Gerald was present in our house every evening after 5:30 for 45 years. He sat in his chair, the brown recliner in the corner of the living room, the one I gave to Goodwill the month after the funeral, the one that had the permanent impression of him in the cushion. He watched his program, he ate the dinner I made, he read the newspaper. He went to bed at 10 o'clock. He was, by every physical measure, there. He stopped asking about my day approximately 3 years into the marriage. I don't mean he became hostile about it. I don't mean there was a moment of rupture where he decided he was no longer interested in my life. It was a gradual thing, the way a path through grass disappears, not because anyone blocks it, but because nobody walks it anymore. He stopped wondering. He had assessed the situation. I was managing, the children were fine, the house was running, he was providing, and the assessment satisfied him. He knew I was all right. He was providing, therefore I was all right. He provided everything. I just didn't know that providing and knowing were different words. I have turned that sentence over for 3 years now, looking at it from different angles, trying to find the place where it isn't true. I haven't found it. Gerald knew my dress size and my coffee order, and the name of the doctor I saw, and the church I went to, and the names of my friends. He knew the facts of my life. What he did not know, what he stopped wondering about, somewhere around year 3, and never started again, was the interior of it. What I thought about, what I wanted, what I had given up, and whether I minded, what I was afraid of, what I was proud of, what I would have done if I had been asked, with one afternoon entirely my own. He never asked, not because he was cruel, because he was satisfied. He had done his job, and his job did not include curiosity. Now, I need to say something about Kevin, because Kevin is not in this story as a villain either. Kevin said what he said at that funeral because he believed it completely. He had watched his father provide, watched him reliably, steadily, completely manage the financial and practical life of our family. And he had absorbed that as the definition. Good husband provides. Gerald provided. Therefore, good husband. Kevin is, right now, in his own marriage, providing and believing it is the same thing as being present. I know this because I watch him with his wife, the way I watch Gerald with me. The particular way a man can be in a room and absent from it at the same time, and believe the being in the room is enough. This is what gets handed down. Not malice, not cruelty, a definition, a blueprint passed from father to son, without anyone stopping to ask whether the blueprint was complete. I spent 3 years after Gerald died being angry at him. Then, slowly, I realized I was standing in the wrong place. I wasn't angry at Gerald. I was angry at the thing that made Gerald, the thing that made my father, the thing that is currently making my son, the thing that tells men that funding a life is the same as inhabiting it with someone. That thing is not dead. That thing is still walking around. Kevin does not know I think about this. I am working up to the conversation. I have been working up to it for 2 years. I will get there. Our 25th wedding anniversary was in June of 1998. Gerald made a reservation at the restaurant he always made reservations at, the Italian place on the east side, the one we had been to for every anniversary since our 5th. I had stopped mentioning that I would have liked to try somewhere new, approximately 10 years earlier, when it became clear that suggesting somewhere new made Gerald vaguely uncomfortable in a way he couldn't articulate, and so expressed as logistical skepticism. The parking over there is supposed to be terrible. So we went to the Italian place. The chicken marsala was good. It was always good. He handed me a card across the table. Inside the card was a check for $500. His handwriting, the neat, controlled handwriting of a man who had worked in offices his whole life, said, "Happy anniversary, Dot. 25 years. Get yourself something nice. Love, Gerald." I looked at the check. I looked at him. He was cutting his chicken with the precise economical movements he used for everything. No wasted motion, Gerald, in any area of life. And he was watching the restaurant, the way he always watched rooms, cataloguing them. I thought, I don't want $500. I thought, I want you to put down your fork and ask me what I have been thinking about for the last 6 months. I said, "Thank you, Gerald. This is very generous." I did not spend the $500 for 2 years. I couldn't find anything I wanted to buy. Now, I need to tell you something about the physical life of our marriage, and I want to do it carefully because I am a private woman, and because I think it is possible to be truthful without being specific in ways that serve no one. Gerald was not a physically demonstrative man. In the early years of the marriage, I had understood this as steadiness. He was not the volatile kind, not the man who swung between grand gestures and cold withdrawals. And after growing up in a household where my father's moods governed the entire emotional weather of our family, Gerald's consistency felt like safety. It took me longer than it should have to understand that consistency and warmth are not the same thing either. Somewhere in the middle years, I could not give you a year. It happened too gradually for a year. Gerald stopped reaching for me first, not in anger, not as a withdrawal of something that had been offered and then revoked, simply as a slow retreat, the way a tide goes out. And if you are not watching for it, you do not notice it has gone until you are standing on dry sand, wondering when the water left. I noticed it one night in, I think, the early 2000s. We were in bed, and I lay there in the dark, doing the accounting that you do when a thing has been bothering you and you finally let yourself look at it. When had he last reached for my hand? When had he last touched my face? Not in the specific intimacy of that, which had its own diminishments I will not detail, but simply, casually, the way people who love each other touch each other because they are in proximity, and proximity with someone you love produces the reflex of touch. I could not find it. Searching backward through the months, I could not find a single instance of Gerald reaching for me without occasion. I reached for his hand that night. He patted it once, the way you pat the hand of someone you are reassuring, and turned over to sleep. I lay in the dark for a long time. There is a phrase now, touch starvation, that names what I was experiencing. I did not have the phrase. I had the check for $500 and the restaurant we went to every year, and a husband who confused funding desire with knowing it. And I told myself that this was just how marriages became after a certain number of years, and that women who wanted more were naive about the nature of long marriages, and that I was being ungrateful. I was not being ungrateful. I was hungry. I had been hungry for years. I had just been taught very thoroughly not to name it. 6 months after Gerald died, on a Tuesday evening in September of 2021, my daughter Patrice called. Patrice is my youngest. She is 43, and she has my tendency to make lists and her father's directness, but she points that directness somewhere he never did. She has always seen more than she said. I knew that about her even when she was a child, the way she would watch things without commenting, storing them up. When she called that evening, I could hear something different in her voice before she said anything. A kind of care, the way you speak to someone you are about to ask something real. She said, "Mum, I want to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." I said, "All right." She said, "Were you happy?" Not, "Was it a good marriage?" Not, "Was Dad good to you?" Not any of the questions that have easier answers, the questions I had been answering at that funeral reception for 3 hours with complete fluency. Just, "Were you happy?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I want to tell you about the performance before I tell you what happened next, because you need to understand what 45 years of performing the perfect wife actually looks like from the inside, so that you understand why I could not answer my daughter's question. The performance was not dramatic. That is the thing about it. It was not a performance in the theatrical sense, not something I put on and took off. It was structural. It was the slow accumulation of small adjustments, each one reasonable, each one its own kind of practical, until the adjustments were me, and I could no longer find the line between who I was and what the role required. Gerald did not like what he called scenes. He did not punish scenes. I want to be precise again because precision matters. He simply left the room, quietly, without anger. He would stand up from wherever he was sitting and leave the room, and the conversation would be over. And his leaving was worse than any argument would have been, because it had no surface to push against. You cannot fight a man who simply becomes absent. So I learned, over years, to deliver my opinions softened, to mention things as observations rather than complaints, to want things quietly, in ways that did not require him to respond with anything more than a nod. I became very good at this, frighteningly good at it. Gerald, I am certain, believed I was a genuinely contented woman. I gave him every reason to believe it. There is a question I never asked Gerald, not once in 45 years. I asked it internally, regularly, with the particular heaviness of a question you already know won't be received. The question was, "Gerald, what do I want for my birthday this year?" He gave me things for my birthday, reliable, thoughtful enough things, a piece of jewelry, a gift certificate to a store I liked, once a weekend trip to see a friend I hadn't visited in years. He chose well, Gerald. He was a man who paid attention to practical details. He simply never asked. It did not occur to him that asking was part of the gift. Now, here is what I need you to understand about Kevin and what he said at the funeral, because I have been thinking about it for 3 years, and I have finally found the words. Kevin looked at me and said, "Dad took such good care of you." And what Kevin saw was true. Gerald did take care of me. Every need I had was met. Housed, fed, clothed, insured, transported, provided for in every material way a woman can be provided for. Kevin watched that his entire childhood and absorbed it as the definition of love. And Kevin is, right now in his marriage, taking care of his wife in every material way, and believing it is enough. And she may be standing in her kitchen right now, looking at some version of a check for $500, thinking, "I don't want this." I want you to ask me what I've been thinking about. I am not angry at Gerald anymore. I was, for a while, a low, banked anger that surprised me with its patience, the way it waited. Then I realized the anger was pointed in the wrong direction. Gerald lived the definition he was handed. He handed it to Kevin. Kevin is handing it right now to his son. That is the inheritance. That is the thing I cannot fix by being angry at a dead man. I have a garden. I have kept it for 30 years. Tomatoes, herbs, a row of dahlias along the back fence that I have extended every year since Gerald died. Gerald never came into that garden, not once in 30 years. Did not comment on it at the dinner table, did not eat a tomato and ask where it came from. The garden was entirely mine because he never looked at it. And in 45 years of marriage, an overlooked garden was the only sovereignty I had. Patrice asked me if I was happy. I couldn't answer then. I told her I needed some time with the question. She said she understood. We hung up, and I sat in the kitchen with the lights off for a long time, and I thought about the garden, and I thought about the performance, and I thought about the difference between a woman who is content and a woman who has become very good at not knowing the difference. I'll tell you what I found, but first, there are 3 more truths I need to get through. About a year after Gerald died, I was sitting at Lorraine Ashby's kitchen table. Lorraine has been my closest friend for 41 years. We met at a parish potluck in 1980 and recognized something in each other immediately. The particular recognition of 2 women who are performing the same role in adjacent houses and have never discussed it. Her husband Bernard died 8 years ago. She has been, in the years since, the clearest-eyed person I know on the subject of what our marriages actually were. She refilled my coffee without asking. She never asks. She just watches the cup and refills it, the way women of our generation learn to monitor everything around them. And then she sat down and looked at me with the expression she gets when she has been saving something. She said, "Your marriage was the same as mine. I just figured it out faster." I sat with that for a moment. Then I said, "How much faster?" She said, "About 15 years." We both laughed. It was the kind of laugh that sits right next to crying and could go either way. I want to tell you about the work, not the obvious work, not the cooking and the cleaning, which everyone can see, which Gerald would have acknowledged if you'd asked him, though he would have described it as what Dot does, rather than as labor with a weight and a cost. I want to tell you about the work underneath the work, the invisible infrastructure of our life that I maintained for 45 years without anyone, including me, fully understanding what it was. I scheduled every medical appointment Gerald had for the last 30 years of his life. His annual physical, his dental cleanings, his follow-up with the cardiologist after the minor episode in 2011, the referral to the specialist, the pre-surgery blood work, the post-surgery follow-up, the prescription renewals, all of it. Gerald went to the appointments. I made them, reminded him, drove him when driving was needed, waited in waiting rooms with a book, asked the doctor the questions Gerald forgot to ask, and wrote the answers down. After 30 years of this, Gerald did not know the name of our dentist. I am not exaggerating. I discovered this approximately 6 months before he died, when he mentioned the dentist in conversation and called him Dr. Peterson. Our dentist's name is Dr. Pelham, has been for 30 years. Gerald had been sitting in that man's chair twice a year for 3 decades, and had, at some point, simply stopped registering his name, because the logistics of getting him there were not Gerald's logistics. I maintained every relationship in our family's name. Every birthday card sent to Gerald's family was chosen and written and mailed by me. Every Christmas gift to his mother, his brother, his colleagues was selected by me. Every thank you note, every condolence card, every wedding gift, mine. Gerald signed things I put in front of him and believed he was a considerate person because the consideration was always there. He simply didn't know where it came from. I regulated the emotional temperature of our household for 45 years. When Gerald came home tense from work, I read it within 30 seconds of him walking in the door and adjusted. The dinner conversation, the children's noise level, my own demeanor, to give him the room he needed without him ever having to ask for it. When there was conflict between Gerald and the children, I mediated. When there was conflict between Gerald and his brother, I was the one who called his sister-in-law to repair it. I absorbed things before they became problems, so that Gerald's home life was, as he once said to a co-worker at a party I was standing right next to him at, smooth. Dot keeps things smooth. He meant it as a compliment. He had no idea it was a job description. Father Dominic called me a perfect helpmate. I have thought about that phrase almost every day for 3 years. Helpmate. The word is doing so much quiet work in that one syllable. Help. Not the work itself, the assistance to the work. Not the person, the support to the person. I was the help. Gerald was the thing being helped. That was the grammar of our marriage, and it was the grammar of the compliment, and everyone in that parish hall nodded when Father Dominic said it, because it sounded like honor, and it was actually erasure. And neither Father Dominic nor I, nor anyone standing there, knew the difference in that moment. Lorraine knew. She had figured it out 15 years faster than I did, and she sat across from me at her kitchen table and said what nobody at the funeral had said, what I had needed someone to say for longer than I knew. Your marriage was the same as mine. I just figured it out faster. And then she said something else. She refilled her own coffee this time. I noticed that, the way she refilled her own without watching it. And she said, the thing that got me wasn't that Bernard didn't see it. It was that I didn't see it either, not until it was over. That one landed differently. That one I had to take home and sit with for several days, because she was right. I had not seen it either. I had performed the invisible labor so thoroughly for so long that I had ceased to experience it as labor and begun to experience it as personality. I was the person who remembered things, who maintained things, who smoothed things. That was just who I was. The fact that who I was had been shaped gradually and completely by what the marriage required of me, that part I had not looked at. That part I had called choice. I have a good friend in my church circle, I will not use her name, who is 71 years old and has been doing all of this for 43 years of marriage. And her husband is alive, and she is still doing it, and she does not yet have the word for what she is doing. I think about her when I think about this. I think, I wish someone had sat across from her at a kitchen table 15 years ago and told her that managing someone else's life is labor, and labor has a cost, and the cost is not paid by the person being managed. You are allowed to know that the work you do is work. You are allowed to count it. You are allowed to be tired. 3 weeks after Gerald's funeral, I sat in the office of an estate attorney named Miriam Holtz. Miriam Holtz has a small office downtown, good lighting, a desk that is organized in the way of someone who deals every day with people in crisis and has learned that visible order is a form of reassurance. She had a legal pad in front of her. She asked me to tell her what I had access to. I told her what I didn't. The primary checking account, Gerald's name, Gerald's login, Gerald's password, which I did not know. The investment accounts, 3 of them, which I knew existed because I had heard him mention them over the years, the way you hear someone mention furniture in a room you have never been invited into. The online bill pay, through which every utility, every insurance premium, every subscription was automatically paid from an account I could not open. The email address where all financial correspondence was delivered, statements, confirmations, alerts, an address I had never been given and to which I did not know the password. The Medicare portal, the supplemental insurance portal, the account for the home warranty, the account for the car insurance. Gerald had a small notebook in the top drawer of his desk. I knew it existed. I had seen him consult it. I did not know where the desk was. I mean this literally. I did not know which piece of furniture in his study he referred to as his desk, because I had not been in his study with any regularity in perhaps 15 years. It was his room in the way the kitchen was my room, and I had respected that boundary with the same unexamined thoroughness with which I had respected all the other invisible boundaries of our marriage. Miriam listened to all of this without expression, the professional expression of a woman who is giving nothing away because what she is hearing requires her to give nothing away. When I finished, she looked at her legal pad. Then she looked at me, and she said with genuine kindness, "This is more common than you'd think. We'll get through it." I said, "Thank you." I drove home. I sat in the kitchen and I thought, that is the most frightening thing anyone has said to me this month. Not because of the getting through it. I believed her about that. She had the competent air of a woman who got through things regularly and efficiently. Because of the more common than you'd think. Because what it meant was, I was not a unique case. I was not an anomaly, a woman whose particular husband had been unusually controlling, or unusually private, or unusually anything. I was a category. I was a situation Miriam Holtz had sat across from enough times to have a prepared phrase for it, a reassuring opener that she deployed because she had learned it was the right thing to lead with, because she had seen what happened when she didn't lead with reassurance. I was 70 years old, and I was a category. It took 3 months. Miriam found the notebook. It was in the top right drawer of the wooden desk in the corner of the study, the one I had walked past for 15 years without registering as the desk. 3 months of legal work, administrative calls, account transfers, death certificate filings, identity verifications. During those 3 months, I could not access our checking account independently. Miriam had to be involved in every transaction above a certain amount. I was 70 years old, and I was effectively on an allowance. Not because Gerald had intended it. I want to say that clearly. I do not believe he intended it. But because he had never imagined it. He had managed everything so completely for so long that the possibility of me needing to manage it alone had simply not entered his planning. He had mentioned to Kevin that Kevin should help me with the finances if anything ever happened. He had not mentioned this to me. Now, I want to tell you what I did after Miriam's office, because I think this is the part that matters most practically, and I am not a woman who delivers a problem without also delivering what she did about it. I made a list. I make lists for everything. It is how I think, how I have always thought, and I made the most important list of my life. Every account, every password, every automatic payment, every subscription, every digital asset, every login, every portal. I updated it for 6 months, until Miriam said it was complete. I printed it and put it in a sealed envelope in a fireproof box on the shelf in my closet. Patrice has a key to that box. Brenda has a copy of the list in her own fireproof box. I update it every 6 months, and I tell both of them when I have updated it. I also want to tell you this. In 2026, this problem is worse than it was in 2021. The digital footprint of a household has expanded in ways that Gerald's generation and mine did not anticipate. Streaming accounts, cloud storage with photographs and documents inside them, email archives going back 20 years, two-factor authentication tied to a phone number or a device that may not survive the person it belonged to. The locked house Gerald left behind would be more locked today than it was 3 years ago. Every year it gets more locked. If your husband manages the digital life of your household, if he is the one who knows the passwords, handles the accounts, manages the automatic payments, I am asking you right now, today, to have one conversation. One. Sit down together and make the list. Not because you are planning for death, because you are planning for your own life, and your own life requires that you be able to get into it. Gerald did not intend to leave me in a locked house. He simply never thought about the door. My neighbour, Paulette Osse, has lived across the fence from me for 20 years. She came to the fence one afternoon. This would have been perhaps 5 or 6 years before Gerald died. One of those late summer afternoons when the light goes gold and long, and you end up talking longer than you meant to. I was in the garden, staking the dahlias. Paulette was watching from her side of the fence with the particular attention she gives things, which is the attention of a woman who looks directly at what she is looking at. She said, "You know, I've lived next to you for 15 years, and I've never seen Gerald come into that garden." I said, "He's not much of a gardener." She said, "No, I know. I just mean, you grew a whole garden, and he never once came to look at it." She wasn't accusing anyone of anything. She was making an observation with the mildness of someone who isn't sure it's her place to say it, but is going to say it anyway because she has been thinking it for a while. I thanked her for the conversation and went back to my dahlias and did not think about what she had said for approximately 2 years. Then Gerald died, and I thought about it all the time. I have kept a kitchen garden for 30 years. Tomatoes, herbs, one ambitious row of dahlias along the back fence that I have been extending since Gerald died, until now it runs the length of the yard. For 30 years, while Gerald was alive, he never came into that garden, did not comment on the tomatoes at dinner, did not mention the dahlias when they were at their peak in August, which they were every year spectacularly, did not eat a thing from that garden and ask where it came from. He passed the window that looks out onto the backyard several thousand times, and I do not believe he registered what was out there. The garden was mine because he never looked at it. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because I think it is the saddest thing I have said today, and I have said some things. The only piece of my life in 45 years that was entirely, sovereignly, uncomplicatedly mine, that belonged to no one's schedule, no one's preference, no one's opinion, was mine because he didn't notice it. Not because he gave it to me, not because he saw it and respected it as my space, because he never looked. My sovereignty was accidental. My freedom was the shape of his indifference. Now, Patrice asked me if I was happy. I told her I needed some time with the question. I sat with it for weeks, not avoiding it, genuinely sitting with it, the way you sit with something you owe an honest answer to. I turned it over. I looked at it from different directions. I tried to answer it cleanly and found I couldn't. Here is what I found instead. I found that I had been content. I had been capable. I had been needed and useful and busy and present. For Gerald, for the children, for the parish, for the invisible architecture of a life that ran because I ran it. I had been all of those things for 45 years with genuine investment, not resentment, not performance alone. I had actually, truly cared about doing those things well. But happy? Happy is a different question. Happy asks about the interior. Happy asks, when you were alone in yourself, separate from the role, separate from the function, separate from what you were for, what did you feel? And the honest answer, the one I owe Patrice and owe myself, is that I do not know. I was so rarely alone in myself that I am not sure I knew the interior was there to check.